Hi. Who's the person in charge?
Any of us here from staff, what can I help you with?
Is this part of the CIP?
This is exactly what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any way I can address the citizens here before you start?
Well, we're definitely going to have a structured Q&A session right after our informative presentation about the capital planning process. And that's where we're going to open up the floor to everyone.
Okay, I'd like to speak at that time, please.
Absolutely, sir. Everyone will have a chance to.
So this is part of 2012 CIP?
No,
No,
no, sir.
So what's CIP stand for? Community Improvement Plan.
This is not related to that. This is just future feedback on future capital planning. That is an existing program. Did you have specific questions about that?
Well, I attended a meeting similar to this in 2017 and talked about the party box library grant. And to this day, you guys haven't completed.
you can pin this one. So go here. So you can make this so pin. Yep.
Part of
And then also go to yes, that. Oh wait, go ahead. Yeah, you could hide that. Or you could just do this one, that little one. Yep, and that's what you see. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We're just gonna take maybe a couple of more minutes, let everyone get situated, and we're gonna begin with the presentation. Once again, this is our capital planning meeting. This is where we give you, the community, the opportunity to give us your input on your ideas, what you value in your community, what your priorities are, what you've identified as needs or improvement, or what you think is great and you'd like to see more. Now, we're going to, let's see, I think we could start the unmute. Marcel, you want to unmute? We're going to be holding a hybrid meeting, which means that you all here in the in-person audience are going to be participating with people at home that opted to participate virtually with us. And so we are going to manage the meeting so that everyone sees the same presentation, and we're going to have a lot of time for Q&A for people that are here in person and people that are also at home. Maybe some of the things that you didn't see on the survey. And then we'll close it up with any lingering questions that you might have. Next slide.
Right, so good evening, everybody. So before we get into it, just so that everybody knows who's in this room, I want to introduce myself, my staff. We're going to be supporting this meeting in case you have any questions. So my name is Alex Huffman. I lead our capital planning division within our capital improvement department, which is leading this effort. I'm joined by Daniela Quesada, who's our chief architect, who you just heard from, Also sitting here is Apollonia Roldan, Joaquin Rodriguez, you'll be hearing from later, and then Marcela Azzolini. Next slide, please. So just to give everybody a good idea of what we're trying to achieve tonight. So we're going to be talking a lot about what the community priorities are. And I'm sure a lot of you have a question as to why now? Why are we talking about this? And the reason that we're talking about this tonight is because as part of our strategic planning process that took place in December of this past year, which involved your elected officials, the city representatives, they directed staff to begin the development of a bond. And so we're going to be talking about community priorities, but we're going to be talking about these community priorities with the idea being that if council decides to move forward with the bond, that some of these projects that are being identified as priorities may show up on that effort. So I just want to make sure that there's a clear connection between what we're doing tonight and what the results of this effort may actually end up manifesting themselves as. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
Our main engagement platform. So if everyone please, using your mobile phones, use the QR code to tap into our website. And while you do that, I'm going to give the floor to Bettina to address the audience on behalf of District 3.
Where do I stand in here?
Anywhere you want. The microphone picks everything up.
So fancy.
So just in case, if you can't use the smartphone code, we do have paper surveys here that you can take instead. So if you like a paper survey, you can raise your hand and distribute those.
There's English and Spanish, so let us know your preference.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bettina Olivares. I'm with City Representative Cassandra Hernandez's office. I see a lot of our constituents here, so thank you so much for being present here and online. I did want to just say a few things on behalf of the representative who's expecting a baby in about a week, which is why she's not here. So I'll be here on her behalf, and she just wanted me to express that this is a great opportunity for the public to give their input and express their views on what they'd like to see when a bond comes through. I think it's certainly a testament to the Capital Improvement Department, urban planning, and our PIO office that really shows how they want to communicate and their efforts to really hear what the public would like to see. And Representative personally is very in support of this potential bond, which is this survey is tied to. So it's something that she would like to see go to the voters, and I'm sure they're going to explain more about that, but so I may be jumping the gun. But some of her priorities as you go through the survey and as you think about things is there are different things that are going to be covered, but for her priority is going to be street infrastructure and maintenance. I can't tell you how many calls we get about streets. And they're just, why is this street done, but my street's not done? I've been here for 50 years. My street's never been renovated. Our Paso and our streets department know the need. It's just a matter of funding, pretty much. So when they come to you with these kinds of initiatives, this is your chance to really say what you like. And the feedback is heard. This is one of many meetings. And we really do take it into account. And if you ever hear like, oh, the representatives or council are going to do what they want, if we end up doing stuff that you don't like, we end up hearing from you. So we want to hear from you. We want to do what's in your best interest. So it's truly a matter of privilege that we get to hear your feedback. Another two things that she would like covered, and I'll try to be brief, is green infrastructure. When we think about new facilities and retrograding certain buildings for solar panels, even though we're not there yet, making sure that if a new facility gets there, that facility is prepared for that. Thirdly, which is something that I think is really important for neighborhoods, is our neighborhood improvement program, which is NIP. That is designated for neighborhood associations. And it's for neighborhood associations to request small physical improvements to neighborhoods. And this neighborhood has benefited a lot from that. We have several neighborhood associations, Lower Valley, Mission Valley, Thomas Manor, Valley View, all kind of in this area. And Each one of those, I think, have taken advantage of the NIP program by asking for small park improvements, by asking for sidewalk gaps or roundabouts, little improvements that wouldn't be fully in a capital improvement plan, but it's something that your neighborhood wants to just improve that quality of life. So in the last 2012 bond election, that program was funded through that. That program is in its last year. And so we would definitely love to see that be considered in this bond to replenish those funds for that program, because it seems to be so popular with our neighborhoods and really does help beautify. So just keep that in mind. And I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Downtown. So here we are. I don't have it's actually not forever. But I think the majority wants to do it. So I have for bonds, for tax bonds, and then we have to do what the state do, especially with voter bond, the way that the arena was voter bond.
No,
There's no political will. We have some lawyers from hospital business. And some back Brooklyn, just sitting on here moving forward in the arena.
right.
That's what Paso needs. It needs more things like that. And that's why there's a great thing, and that's why everybody needs to Austin, and that's why everybody needs to Dallas, because people don't think we're good enough, can afford, can support, or do any of the things that other cities do, other cities do. And I know about this because I was vice chair of the tourism cabinet for John in 2007. And I went all over the country looking for a theme park that comes from Paso. I'm gonna tell you what, when it comes down to it, nobody has a political will to do anything like that. Even when it just, tax payment for 10 years, pre-tax payment for 10 years, and the property advocate or whatever. But it really bothers me about the arena. And that's not getting an arena. What's gonna happen with that money?
So I hear your concerns, and I think that this is a great opportunity to express those concerns, because even though that's not the bond we're talking about, can exacerbate kind of the feelings we had about bonds because of certain projects. I'll leave it to the capital improvement department to answer those questions, but for the arena, strictly because it is stuck in legal litigation, that's why it's not moving forward. Your frustrations, I can probably say that everybody at the city feels the same way about those frustrations and not being able to move forward, especially on something that is voter approved. But I will again turn that over to CID, since we also have our agenda and we have plenty to go over for this bond. But I'll wrap it up unless somebody else has any questions in regards to Representative Hernandez or anything I had mentioned. Yes, so the question was in regards to the arena and how that is tied to the last large bond we had with quality of life in 2012. The proposed arena or multi-purpose center that is supposed to be put downtown has not progressed at the state that we had wanted or had hoped, due to its pending legal litigations. And he's expressing frustration with considering a new bond when there are certain projects like the arena that have not been completed.
Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you.
I hope everyone was able to navigate using the QR code, either that was on the screen or that we put in here to the printed to access the website. If you've never used a QR code, you just take your camera with your phone, you take a photo of it, and it takes you to the website. We're more than happy, if you chose not to do it right now, we're more than happy to walk you through it at the end of the meeting as well. Just because it's a great tool that facilitates the use of, again, our online platform. So once you enter our website, elevateep.com, it takes you to this landing page. Now, what staff is going to do in the next 15 minutes or so is walk you through an overview of how capital planning works. And to your point, sir, to inform you as to how projects are identified, how they go through the process of So when you go to take the survey, you'll notice that there's a top bar which says select the language. From that drop-down screen or menu, you can select any language that you'd like the page translated to, whether that's Spanish or whatever other language you feel most comfortable getting your information about this website and our entire initiative. You'll also see there's a top ribbon with Your Opinion Matters, which will take you directly to the survey, to the live survey reports, results, excuse me, and the upcoming in-person event. Scroll down a little bit, If you scroll down a little, you'll see an overview of the process, and you'll see a tab that says Learn about the process here. And we're going to walk you through exactly the information of the process here in the meeting, but we welcome you to, or we invite you and encourage you to peruse the same information tabs on your own time. Go ahead and go to Veronica.
Excuse me, I'm gonna walk here. All right, so capital plan development. So again, what we're talking about here tonight is how we identify what the community's priorities are for the future. When we talk about capital planning, really what we're talking about is how we identify projects that actually support what the community desires to see. And it can be a lot of different things. It can be quality of life facilities, so it can be parks, it can be libraries, but it can also be other infrastructure like streets. And really what we're talking about is we're looking out the next 5 or 10 years, trying to anticipate what the needs of the community are going to be. Let's go down a little bit. And so the way that we do this is through a number of different avenues. So first is the strategic plan. So that was something that I covered at the top of this meeting. So the strategic plan is something that the city's now gone through 3 iterations of. Most recently, we actually went through a new one going to be called the 30 and 30 for 2030. And through that process, we worked with city leadership, we worked with city council representatives, and they informed that process to say, here are the big picture ideas that we envision that we want to see in our community. What we're going to be doing later is we're going to be going through a survey that reflects a lot of the items that were discussed during that process. The next part is going to be public outreach. So I know that, again, tonight we're going to be talking a lot about what are the community's priorities, but later what we're going to be having is a discussion about very specific projects. That doesn't happen tonight. That's going to happen later because we want to get the input first. And with that input, we're going to know what are the projects. We can then report that back to this group, to city council, who will decide what projects ultimately end up on a potential bond initiative and how that impacts you as a taxpayer. But again, that's going to take place later, and we're going to go over a timeline of what that looks like here in the next couple of slides. Tonight we're in public engagement. All right, so public engagement again is the opportunity to think big. What are the priorities that we have for yourself, for your neighbors, for your family that you want to see in the city? And again, this is going to be reflective of the strategic planning process. Let's go down a little bit more. And then finally, we're going to be talking a little bit about how we're going to take that data, we're going to report it back to city council. So that's why this meeting tonight is so important. So we're not just going to be talking about it, and that's going to be the end that you ever hear from it. We're going to show you how your input matters. We're going to show you how you can track how your neighbors are also voting. And then we're going to take those results and report them to city council, where they're going to ultimately decide whether or not they want to follow the recommendations of the community. And so finally, that's going to lead to project selection. Right? So we've now gone through the public engagement process. We report the findings to city council. We're going to know what those projects are. And then that's what's going to be done through the public outreach. So if you participated in the public safety bond in 2020, that's where that process looks that same way. So that's going to be, how does it affect you as a taxpayer? What are the facilities that are going to be built? What are the streets that may be repaved or reconstructed? That's when we're going to have that information. But that's going to come after this process. And then finally, project funding. So I know this is a big question, right? So I know that everybody's really concerned about property taxes. And so again, we wouldn't just be clear that while we're talking about a bond at this juncture, and that's really what we're looking to get this feedback for. If you don't see a project end up on the bond, doesn't mean that's not going to happen. There's lots of other ways that the city can pay for it. It can be paid for through your property taxes. And knowing what the community's priorities are a really good way to help council set the budget accordingly. So that way it's representing the things that are important to the community, which is another reason why we're doing this tonight. So it's not just about the bond. It's about a bigger discussion of what the community's priorities are. So let's talk a little bit about then the process. So the process that we're talking about, that we're looking at the ultimate goal being a potential bond election November 8th of 2022. That's when the bond election would take place, that council decides to move forward with it, that you would have the opportunity to vote yes or no. To get there, we have to have a bond introduction ordinance happen no later than August 2nd. So I'm going backwards because I think it will make more sense that way. And then to get there, what we'll be doing is we'll be informing you as a taxpayer what type of impact that will have on you. That's also when we're going to have the projects identified. It's going to be happening in spring. And then again, we're starting right now with community engagement, early winter. So if you can scroll down a little bit more, to put those in terms of actual months, we're going right now, February to April, public engagement. We're doing this meeting, we're going to be doing lots of other meetings. So we're going to be doing regional meetings. There's going to be 5. This is the first of 5. We're also going to be doing district-specific meetings. So you can come again to those meetings with your representative, or you can go to another representative's meetings if you like. Then we're going to go to from community engagement to project selection. So we're going to present the findings of this process to City Council. City Council is going to say, based on the feedback that we received, these are projects that are going to be selected. This is how much the bond potentially is going to cost. We'll bring that information back to you. You'll have the opportunity to see what the project list is and how much of a bond might be requested. From there, then we're going to do public outreach again. And then that's going to be taking place up until August. Again, trying to hit that target date no later than August 2nd. Well, ultimately, council will decide through a vote whether or not they want to call a bond election in November. And so what we want to end with, again, is because we're really trying to make sure that there's a clear connection between our public engagement that we do, our strategic planning process, and projects that ultimately end up on the bond. So this is a short video to show previous projects that were part of our strategic plan and that are actually completed through our bond process. But it's really important because what we hear from you tonight is ultimately going to shape projects that you see in the future.
And so this is our first Q&A with you all. If you have any questions on the process that we just briefly outlined, we wanted to just touch on all the major steps. Obviously, there's more information on the website. Joaquin, do you want to give an overview of the presentation before we begin taking questions?
Yeah, I think a lot of you probably have a question right now while you're here. So before we go to questions, let's just go over that. Really, you're here as part of the capital planning process, and primarily we want to share our survey with you and share all of our outreach too. What we've tried to do with this meeting, and we'll be doing with all the meetings going forward, is giving the same opportunity for folks who can come in person and folks who can only attend virtually. So this meeting is being broadcast virtually. I think there are, I don't know how many, but a handful of people who joined us virtually tonight. And the primary thing we're going to look at in a little bit is a survey that we put together to gather input from you all in a way that we can really dive into the data and take a look at those results. Again, how will the results be used? We're going to use your data from the survey combined with real world data from other initiatives that we've had at the city, things like equity, things like historical investments into certain areas. All of those are hopefully going to be put together to help your elected officials make an informed decision when they choose a project list and when they ultimately choose how to fund those projects. The survey is very straightforward. It's 10 questions. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll ask you a few questions about yourself, where you're from, and then primarily we're going to focus not on individual projects, but on project areas. So things that are important to you, things that you consider your values for investment of taxpayer funds. And then finally, as I said, the ultimate goal is to come up with a list of projects based on your input and other data for elected officials to evaluate. That's our ultimate. You can scroll a little bit further down. So this is a good place to pause. I'm going to give you a lot of info on the capital planning process. So if you have questions on the process or questions on the survey that we're going to go through, this is a good time to do it. Keep in mind, we will have some time at the end for questions that maybe aren't specific to the process or specific to the survey that we're going to go through. Has anyone done the survey already? I know our public information office. Was it pretty straightforward?
Yeah. My name is Manny.
Yes.
I copied this email.
Yes.
I thought it was a survey, but again, it all depends on what people want.
Absolutely.
What I put in was what I.
And for everyone's benefit, Mr. Mono shared an email with us about a lot of different priority areas that the city should be focusing on. What we've tried to do with the survey, for folks who can't go into that much detail in an email to us or don't have the time to do that, we've tried to distill a lot of those questions into a series of multiple choices that still get us to the same point and get us the same feedback as having a lengthy one-on-one conversation with you. So hopefully we've done that. If there aren't any more questions on the process,
I'd like to ask something, I hope it contains this. Simply talk about, like the NIP program.
yes.
I recently, last year, I made an application for some work hired. Never found out the result, and found myself, found out it was canceled because the thing we wanted, that I was asking for, the city said it was not their property, or somebody else. Well, the city's been cleaning for 40 years, now it's not theirs. Now we're going through the process, and now there's 3 departments are fighting over who's responsible for this property. And this is one of the problems when you have programs like this. You want public help. Your intentions are good, and when they go up the hill there, it seems to phase out. They lose their steam. And how can you expect people to want to really participate when those things happen? Nobody seems to know who's responsible. Tomorrow we're supposed to have a meeting with the street department. I hope it was tough. But in the meantime, the project that I put in for was canceled.
Yeah, so I understand your frustration with that. I would be frustrated as well. I think one thing we've tried to do with this survey that is a huge change from how the city has operated in the past is that as you fill out the survey and as results come in, they're automatically reported to a publicly available dashboard. So everyone's survey results are going to be available to the public. You'll see exactly how those responses break down. So that's really a big step forward in transparency on processes like this. I can speak to your specific issue, but I think it's a little more specific than the whole audience will want to hear, but we can discuss it afterwards as well. Yes, sir.
This is not only a very can you basically define what you talk about project? What type of project qualifies as a project? What are we talking about?
So if you all are ready, we can jump into the survey. And actually the first survey question sort of breaks down the 4 major project areas that we can look at when we're talking about capital improvement plan.
And we can elaborate on the questions.
to help you understand, depending on your answers, the various types of projects that can come out of your responses. So capital projects are any kind of improvement that the city can make on the built environment, on infrastructure. But like what Joaquin said, I think we'll be able to address those questions more specifically as we go through the survey. That's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So just for the benefit of everyone online, when you all are speaking, just yell at that white thing in the middle of the room. That's our 360-degree camera and microphone. I think they're having a little trouble hearing this, so.
So we'll do our best to project a little bit more, and please, if you have any questions, use your outdoor voices.
So was there any other questions?
What kind of money, what kind of bonds are we looking for in projects? Like, for example,
So those are details that we really explored. Our intent
We can't hear.
is to identify more values and those priorities. for projects.
Joaquin. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're going to try something so our virtual audience can understand us better. When somebody asks a question, staff will repeat that question before they start answering.
So the question was, what size of bond are we looking at and what types of projects?
yeah, how many different projects, for example, maybe 12 site, or town water works, you know?
Yeah, so right now,
With the people that need, and then we did the children's museum, right? With pocket parks here, and jogging trails here, and it's spreading it all out pretty much, but is there any one big item on there that you can get there, get from the office, like an elevator on I-10 with a 4-story parking structure? And you, like, from Las Palmas all the way down to the west end with parking structure for, it's just one train like Minneapolis, and I travel a lot, and for a lot of cities that are doing elevators, their quality. It's pathetic. And all we keep doing is resurfacing the streets and making more freeways and doing this and saving traffic. And there's lots that could use like an elevator. And use a bond like Denver did to build T-Rex, like Boston did, like a lot of other cities do that, do the bonds.
yeah, I just want to pause you there so we can sort of repeat everything
Yeah.
for the benefit of the folks on Zoom.
Like a big project, you know, like maybe one every 5 years or so.
So essentially the
How does someone
question
act?
for everyone on Zoom, the question is about the scope of the projects and the scale of the projects that we're currently targeting for this capital planning and bond initiative. And my response would be that at this point, that hasn't been identified. What we're really trying to do is get a sense for your values and your priorities. So one of your examples was about parks here and there and aquatic facilities here and there. What we're trying to determine tonight is, do you prefer parks over aquatic facilities, or do you prefer aquatic facilities over parks? So that when we ultimately develop a project list with your elected officials, we can make sure that those values are being addressed. I hope that answers your question.
Projects that are more socioeconomic development, that bring in tourists and bring in other people's money.
I think if we get into the survey, a lot of your questions are going to be
Yes,
answered, or you may
there
have a
will
lot.
be an opportunity to address all of those points in the survey questions. And once we get to those questions, if you feel something is unclear, we'll be happy to elaborate on that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the question, in terms of like, you said the city staff will present their findings or what they found in the surveys and their feedback. Are council members able to add or take out certain projects from that feedback that they gather?
So the question was if city council is able to add or remove from the feedback that we ultimately forward to them. And the answer is absolutely yes. Ultimately, the scope of the bond and the projects that are chosen are up to your elected officials. That's not something that we decide upon as staff. What we're doing is putting forward your values, your priorities, and then based on a lot of other data that we have on equity and historic investment and departmental needs and capital needs within the community, we'll help develop that project list for council to evaluate. But ultimately, the final decision is with your elected officials.
I just had a follow-up question. Who decides the how projects are financed? Who decides that?
So the follow-up question was, who decides how projects are financed? And again, ultimately, that is up to your elected officials. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, we can jump into the survey. If you're on your phone. Yeah.
Is there anyone in the virtual space that has some questions for staff?
Yes. They are able to unmute themselves.
Okay. So call on somebody. Oh, so based on the overall timeline, yes.
So if council decides, again, the timeline is August 2nd, council has to decide whether or not they're going to vote to do an introduction, which will set the bond election. If they do that by August 2nd, the election would take place November 8th of this year.
Okay.
So at home, we have a comment from Philip Sullivan, and I'm just gonna read it out loud, so. Yes. I believe that parks are more important, but not traditional parking, from not only a personal and societal need, but more importantly, an ecological need. We need to reestablish the native cottonwood, mesquite, and desert willow along the Rio Grande and Valley areas. This would be a unique opportunity to establish a riverwalk type of park. That is the comment from Philip Sullivan at home.
Are there any questions? Does anybody want to unmute themselves in the virtual space? So we have participants virtually, and so we're giving them an opportunity right now to raise their hands and they can unmute and ask any questions.
Doesn't look like.
No?
Hello,
Yes.
I'm willing to speak. This is Philip Sullivan.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I was just wanted to kind of expand on what I had commented there. I just know as a student from NMSU, I was
Mr. Sullivan, could you give us a brief minute? We want to make sure we adjust the volume so everyone in the in-person audience can hear you.
Sure, absolutely.
Try it now.
It's not going through that.
Can you all hear me? Or do you need a check or mic test?
There we go.
There we go.
ahead.
Now we can hear you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to expound on what I had commented. I just think that, cities like San Antonio have like a Riverwalk experience where, you can, there's a lot going on down in their area. But if we were to retain some of the water possibly and reestablish some of the cottonwoods and native species of plants, it would, not only would it be good as far as, it could bring some sort of commerce and have like some sort of park or some establishment in that way. And it'd be good for people to visit, it'd be somewhat of like a forested area in this area, because the valley of our region is actually a riparian forest that has kind of been taken away because of the dams like Elephant Butte and Percha and Caballo dams. But we could somewhat reestablish this along the river if we were to dam some of the water and retain it, and then reestablish some of these species. And it would be good not only for us, but it would also be really good ecologically for other plant species that are native and for the animals that live along the river. And a lot of species have been lost like throughout the years, like the whooping cranes, because we lost these types of trees and this, our native environment. The ecology was kind of like destroyed by these major dams that were set here, because before all this happened, before they slashed and burned all the cottonwoods for farming, the valley used to flood about like 3 to 6 feet deep every year, and it would stay like this for weeks or even months in the summer. And the cottonwoods were always a sign of permanent water, and they've kind of been uprooted. And some of the cottonwoods used to be about 90 feet tall, and there's not many that are like that anymore. So I just thought that would be kind of a unique idea and a different, approach to a park that isn't your standard, like just grass park, but you're kind of like allowing more of like a river walk type of situation that's more forested and kind of like the Cevalita National Wildlife Area that's south of Albuquerque. That's kind of like a good example, I guess, or a similar example of what I would think would be a good idea.
Thank you for that, Mr. Sullivan. So I think, again, if we get into the survey, you see that there's opportunities to address precisely those types of improvements. So we're not just talking about maybe some of the basic infrastructure needs, but we're talking about the kind of ecotourism or heritage tourism kind of facilities and projects you'd like to see. And we're also going to give an opportunity for you all to give us an open-ended remark as far as what we may have missed, what you'd like to elaborate on any particular question. And again, as we go through the survey, we'd be happy to, again, elaborate on any given topic that you see in the questions.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Well, we're working with our public communications office to make sure they're our outreach arm. So they're the ones that are making all this information about engagement opportunities, our webpage. They're making all of that accessible to you all. And so getting some information as to where the feedback is coming from, where you live, where you're answering the survey, helps us then identify any gaps where we might need our communications office to ramp up their outreach efforts to make sure that we're getting to as much of the community as possible. So the first question in our survey for sure is the option to take it in either English or in Spanish.
Okay. After you do that, then you can click to start the survey. And one of the things that we're asking for is an email address. So the reason that we're asking for the email address is just so that way, if you choose to share your email address, you don't have to, you can skip the question, but you can continue to receive updates throughout the process. So future community meetings, presentations that are made at City Council, and just more information about a potential bond as we move forward in this process. Right, next question is, what district do you live in? So the reason that you want to answer that question is because then we can report out to your council member what are the priorities of their district. It's really important for the representatives to know what their constituents want for their district, so that way they can make recommendations in terms of potential projects that represent the needs and wants of their constituents. If you don't know, real quick, where your district is, you can click on this link at the top. It's going to take you to a map, and it's going to allow you to enter your address and tell you what district you're in. Right, the next thing is then we're looking at the zip code. And the reason for that is so that way within districts, we can see if there's any type of different priorities or wants or needs within a particular district. So it allows us to just look at it in a close enough or a much more zoomed in level, but not so specific that, for example, we'd be looking at a particular property or address. And then the last question that we're going to be asking about the location or geography is going to be major intersection. So again, we're going through the redistricting process. And so one of the reasons we wanted to ask this question is just in case the results of the redistricting process change boundaries. We just want to make sure that we're capturing more or less where the response is coming from. Again, we're not asking for your home address, but we're just looking for an intersection. So one major street and another major street, we're looking for two streets in order to help us reference that point. Go to the next. Okay. And then the last question that we're asking again is whether or not you rent, you own, or you live with your family, or prefer not to say. So again, you can skip any of these questions if you don't feel comfortable answering, but the more information we have, the more informed that we can make the representatives about the wants and needs of residents within their district.
And then this gets into less personal questions and more of the substance of really why we're here this evening. So this first question sort of touches at the overarching values within the community. So we'd like you to rank the following project areas from highest to lowest. So what you can do on your phones, once you've read through those options, is just click and hold and you can drag them around. So the top option should be the project area which you feel is most important. to your daily life as a resident. And then your bottom option will be the one you feel is most important.
And your paper survey obviously ranked 1, 2, 3, 4. The little number next to the.
So the questions following that first question now get into those 4 project areas in a little more detail. So this first one, as the city makes investments in streets and transportation infrastructure, which types of investments do you feel are most important? This is another ranking question, so you can drag and drop those options up and down how you feel appropriate. If you are online or you're in person, feel free to just shout questions out at us at this point.
Are there any clarifications that are needed on any of the ranking options? Everything seemed pretty straightforward because we're asking about different qualitative aspects of streets, right? So we can be talking a little bit about pavement quality, or we can be talking about making certain enhancements. So things like street lighting or bicycle infrastructure. And so we really want to know within streets, what are your priorities and what do you see as things that the city needs to be invested in more so than others?
So this next question, again, focuses on streets. As the city makes investments in streets and transportation infrastructure, what locations do you feel are most important? And these aren't specific locations, right? These are generalized questions about the types of areas that you think are more suited to those investments. So this one isn't a ranking question, but we'd like you to gauge each option based on which you feel is more important, less important, or equally important when compared to the other options.
So
Yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Just to notice on my phone, it cuts off one of it. So you have to scroll over. I don't know if that's with other people's phones.
So, I probably should have pointed out that in the website, before you take the survey, you can select if you are viewing the website on a mobile device or on a laptop. And so if you had clicked on the mobile device, it would have rearranged everything. And I apologize, I should have pointed that out.
You can also just track what you're asking.
No, it allows me to see if they can just scroll.
So within this question, you'll see that there's different locations. So hopefully it seems pretty straightforward, but we're asking about, do you prioritize, for example, in your mind, does the city need to be looking at these investments in more of residential areas as opposed to commercial areas? And within commercial areas, do we need to be looking at our higher traffic streets or we see a lot of volumes? Or should we be looking at locations where there are more destinations, so where you have a lot of businesses and those types of things? And again, the idea is that we want to know where we should be prioritizing these investments. The last option, of course, is locations where we historically have not been invested in. So these would be maybe neighborhoods that have been a really long time since they've seen city dollars being invested in them. And again, it helps us to provide a little bit of insight into the locations that we should be prioritizing investment in streets and infrastructure.
Now we shift our focus to parks and recreation facilities. Again, this is another ranking question. So we're asking where should the city focus its investments in new or refurbished parks and recreation facilities? Areas where data indicates a gap in service. Again, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to be taking your results and combining them with a lot of other data that we have that helps form that project selection process. Existing parks and recreation facilities in need of modernization, areas where the city's investment in parks has historically been low, and areas where recent growth lacks nearby parks and recreation facilities. The next questions are a little different. Instead of asking you to rank things, this is more of sort of a visual preference survey. So as the city makes investments in new parks and rec facilities, which types of facilities do you feel are most appropriate? So we have large regional parks like the Beast, that's the East Side Regional Park, smaller neighborhood parks that would be within walking distance of your neighborhood or your home, investments in new equipment and infrastructure for existing parks, facilities specific to certain sports or activities like football fields or indoor play courts. And then finally, other quality of life facilities like museums and libraries. On this question, you can choose two options that you feel are most important to you.
I think the only thing I would add to this question is the last option where it said other facilities such as museums or libraries. This could also be entertainment venues. I mean, this is something that on the very last question, we asked for an open-ended response. You could reference this question back and say, E, other quality of life facilities, and tell us what kind of quality of life facilities you have in mind. So at the end of the survey, you could add it at the very last question. So you could make your open-ended comment. Your comment could be as long and detailed as you'd like it to be. So you can elaborate on any specific question if you wanted to add something that we were missing. Or if it had nothing to do with any of the questions, and we just completely miss your area of interest entirely, you could write about it in that very last question.
So moving on, the next question, we'd like you to identify the type of quality of life facilities that you are most likely to use in your everyday life. So the options here range all of our parks facilities, so outdoor play fields, indoor recreational facilities like the one that we're in tonight, competition grade aquatics facilities, linear parks and improved trails, open space and natural unimproved trails, and museums, libraries, and cultural facilities. So we shift now, and if you need more time, again, this is available online 24/7. You can take the survey at your leisure if you're trying to follow along tonight. And you can share it with your Facebook friends or your email friends, anyone you'd like to share it with. So we now shift to economic development. How should the city focus its economic development programs and investments? And this goes back to a ranking question. So should we focus on attracting large, big name businesses and retailers with high job potential? Should we focus on supporting small local businesses, meeting local needs and creating fewer jobs individually, but large numbers of jobs collectively? Supporting businesses and industries that align with the goals of regional partners like UTEP, supporting physical improvements to business districts like streets, sidewalks, and parking, or investments that support creating expanded housing options. Again, you can drag and drop. Another question on economic development. Similar to the other topic areas, we want to know where we want to see these investments go. So as the city develops economic development programs, what geographic areas do you feel are most important to focus on? Our options here range from downtown, the district and area where you live, along high priority transportation corridors, on vacant lots or abandoned existing buildings within existing neighborhoods, or maybe you feel that location doesn't matter. Again, with this question, you can choose two options. We're getting close to the end here, so we have a question on climate change. So in regards to addressing climate change, what types of investments do you feel are most appropriate? This is again another ranking question. So investments in solar, like rooftop solar installations for city-owned facilities. I should add on this question that these would be investments that the city makes for city-owned facilities and structure. That is our intent here is to follow with the capital improvement process. These are capital improvements that the city would be making to its own facility. Transit and mobility investments that would help reduce vehicle emissions and traffic congestion, investments in electric vehicles and charging stations, and investments to reduce energy costs and energy use in city facilities. And finally, choose the type of tourism facilities that you would love to see in El Paso that are currently not available. Again, this is a choose two. So we have ecotourism that supports campgrounds near the mountains, creates experience destinations, ecotourism that supports robust local mountain biking events, ecotourism that celebrates our riverfront amenities and supports local farming businesses. And finally, heritage tourism that celebrates our history as a city, specifically our downtown core and traditional neighborhoods. And then our final question is open-ended. So if you think we've missed any project areas, if you think we've just completely missed the mark on what we're asking, feel free to let us know here. If you think we need to add questions in future surveys or conduct this engagement effort differently, this is your opportunity to let us know.
So after everybody has had an opportunity to fill out this question, we did want to open it up for discussion in case there is something that you want to discuss. Just two things before we get into that. So we want to be mindful of everybody's time. So we have this meeting room till 7. We'll push it a little bit, okay? So, but we do want to keep in mind that we need to vacate the space relatively soon. So I ask that if we can maybe spend about 10 minutes for discussion and just try to limit your comments so that way everybody has an opportunity to speak. Okay, yes, sir.
I had a question about the survey.
Yes, sir.
The last question before we ended. Is there a possibility we were going to put the survey again and add a user. Once I took out the survey as part of the grant.
Sure. So I'm just going to repeat the question so that way people are online can hear. So the question was, after you complete the survey, let's say you forget something and you want to have an opportunity to provide some additional feedback. So the answer to that question, sir, is that we're actually going to be having an email address that you can contact us. And so if there is something that you forget, you click submit, there is an opportunity for you to provide that feedback to us and we can incorporate it into the survey results. And that's something that we can do. You can, we wouldn't recommend it, but you could take the survey more than once, but we would prefer that you just take it one time so that way the results don't get changed.
How do I do that?
So in our webpage, there's a portion that says contact us. And you can see that there, you could be your name, your last name, your email, and then whatever suggestion that you might have left off in the survey initially, we'll be able to put it back with your information, because we'll match that up with the information that you gave us during this. And so we'll be watching this space as well.
It's a question that comes from the Senate. She has her hand raised.
Oh, okay. There's a question on Zoom. If we can unmute.
Gisela Campos, if you want to unmute yourself. She has her hand raised. So.
I'm sorry, I'm Isela Campos, but I didn't hear the question.
Oh, you had your hand raised, and so we didn't know if you had a question.
Yes, I had a hand raised and I put my comments online there.
All right, what did you want to expand on it, or should we just look at it in the chat?
Yes, I do recognize that the city needs to work on our streets, and we've been concentrating mainly in the downtown area, and they have done a great job doing that. But I don't want them to forget the Lower Valley, the central Lower Valley, where I live in the Lower Valley. South of the railroad tracks, we have nothing. We don't have any grocery stores. We don't have any clinics. We don't have anything that, why would people want to move here and visit here in this area when it's so hard for them to get the bare necessities? I do want the city to be beautiful, but we need the bare necessities in the Lower Valley. We do have life here. We live here.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that comment. So I think, just to respond, then what I would ask is that if you could please make sure that when you're noting where you would prefer to see investment, just to make sure that you're referencing either in your neighborhood or that in areas where historically there has not been investment. So that way we can make sure that we're capturing that feedback and that we can focus some of the investment in that area.
Okay. And I did put it on there. I did comment and I did put it on there, on the survey.
Thank you. There's a gentleman here that has his hand raised. Yes.
My name is David Galvan, and I would like to follow up with the lady's comments. You guys started a project, it's called the South Central Street Project. It's part of the 2018 capital plan. Phase 5, which is south of Delta, all the way Cortez, all the way was halted due to COVID 2020. I found out through the street maintenance crew that they informed my engineer they can complete the street. They told me that for me not to repeat this, but they had that they had stopped it due to COVID, and they didn't know when they were going to start it. I did speak with the engineer that was in charge of that project. He came to my house. She told me that this was off the record, that more than likely they were going to start March or April of 2021. We are in February of 2022. That thing hasn't started, hasn't been completed, but yet we have people going on the newspaper, Sam Rodriguez saying that 96% of the streets projects were on time and under budget. And now we have a flooding situation because Flower is elevated and the water that's supposed to is now going down our street and creating a flood situation. The water goes all the way up to the curb, from curb to curb. And I just like to know what I understand that this meeting is for us to give input to make our quality of life here in El Paso better. But what I would like to see is that the projects that are started and that have been planned and that have been earmarked with funds to be completed. Here you're wanting to start up other projects and you haven't even completed the phase 5.
So we have one of our colleagues from capital improvements online. He could probably address this question a lot better than any of us in this room can. Jerry, do you mind unmuting and sharing what you shared in the chat?
Sure enough. This is Jerry DeMiro from the Capital Improvement Department. The South Central Phase 5, like a number of projects that were ongoing prior to the pandemic, was deferred until we could figure out whether we had the financing to be able to build it. South Central Phase 5 has been set for purchasing. It is in bidding. We're expecting the bids over the next month, and we expect to start construction within the next 3 months. So we are aware that there is some delay in projects that we had hoped to get done, and that was primarily due to COVID. And that, sir, I want to make sure you know, that's not an excuse. That's reality. COVID deferred a number of projects that we had planned for. And after we saw the impacts of COVID economically, we were able to make a decision, and council rightfully made a decision to say, let's go forward with the projects that we had already planned. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but if I can add any additional information, please let me know.
Well, thank you very much for stating that. I am aware that it was deferred due to the fact that the El Paso City finances were, they did not know how COVID was going to affect the finances of the El Paso budget. Just what was it, last year, the city reported over $1 million, I think $1.5 million over budget due to the fact that they did defer these projects. And so they were able to absorb the pandemic without being under budget. But if they're over budget by over 1.5 million, why is it taking so long to start these things up? Like I stated earlier, I spoke to a female engineer that was in charge of the project. She came to the house and I showed her that since the project wasn't completed, it was creating a flooding situation. She acknowledged it when I showed her the pictures, and she understood why the flooding was occurring when we didn't have that issue. So here they went in there to address drainage, and by not completing it, they created a flooding situation. So here we are. She told me off the record, this was in 2020, that more than likely that they would start the project in March or April of 2021. Here we are in February 2022. My concern with the city is that they start these projects and for whatever reason, they never come into other budget and they never complete them on time. So I like to get some response. I already spoke to a representative. She's gonna look into it. But let's finish the projects that we started and that the monies are still there. And that they weren't gonna be moved from one project to the other. They were earmarked.
Yes, sir. I assure you, South Central Phase 5 will be completed. The funding is there. It is in place. I personally handle the finances for the projects and make sure that there's funding available for that we have. We are committed to completing the projects that are already on the books. This was delayed primarily due to COVID. No one knew what was going to happen with COVID. We could not start in 2021 like we had hoped. It is in bidding right now. And as soon as we get the bids, we'll be able to make an educated decision on who the contractor would be and get started. As you know, South Central Streets, there's been approximately $35 million worth of improvements to South Central Streets in the last 5 years. That's pretty significant. I admit it's taken us time, and I admit it's frustrating. I admit that the area has been underrepresented in the past, but we're committed to completing the streets that we have identified that we will do in our capital plans.
Okay, so if this is just the last question, just please make sure that it's to discuss something that hasn't been highlighted in this. If it's another comment we can discuss, I just want to give everybody the opportunity to discuss a project.
Well, that's like the mediums on the artwork you guys are doing, right? You guys are doing fantastic work on these trails and stuff. You're putting all these trees out in the green industry. I'm a grower, okay, and I've been there for 30 years doing good stuff. But like the mediums that you do, you get this company in O'Malley to bring these trees in. They put a bunch of trees, 3 trees, grow huge, 5 feet apart from one another, and then it'll spread them out. And then we put them right on the edge of curb where they're going to grow into the traffic. And then they use a bunch of substandard planting material, like these things are dangerous, man. Those Spanish daggers and stuff like that. I mean, there's no oversight on that. There's water in the streets every night. Everything's already dying. Everybody's taking the trees. Even before the project's done, it's already in peril or on its way to dying. You know, there's no oversight on the stuff that's being planted and the things that are being done out there. I know, I see it every day. It's a concern.
Sir, we do have an arborist on staff that inspects the projects that provide trees and irrigation. I personally live on the west side. I noticed a whole bunch of purple flags on Wrestler that indicated that the irrigation system was being inspected by Streets and Maintenance. It takes us time. There's a lot of streets in this city, and we're doing our best to make sure we maintain them. I am very impressed with what I've seen with the beautification of the streets, the lighting, the landscaping. They make sure that the trees are not interfering with utilities. And I just think you give us a chance. If you see something that is what you think should not be, then 311, let us know and we'll get right on it. I can assure you, we will be right on it.
Yes, I don't want to get back and forth on a lot of operation stuff. I think what Jerry's trying to say and what all that, there's always going to be room for improvement, right? And through this process and other processes, I'm glad that we're getting your feedback so we can start to identify those problems and hopefully address them. Does anybody else have questions before we leave? We're already a little over time. Yes, ma'am.
A significant debt due to general obligations. We have gone in 2020 to address. Then we have certain legal obligations that was approved by city council because that is not subject to voter approval. And now there's talk about bond and city debt, and I don't have we have right now are not being maintained. And I can see that in the area that I have information about. I asked Tommy Gonzalez at one of the Census meetings, what was the data on utilization by the community of these parks that have been built most recently, that have cost a lot of money, compared to the cost of maintaining them and the cost of building them in the first place. He said that he didn't have that data, that they were working on it, something along those lines. So it seems to me like that data should have been captured way, way back. It seems to me like it should be a regular function of the budget department so that they know exactly, you know, if the use is offsetting the cost of the maintenance. The last thing that I wanted to say is that the parks are not being maintained. We are having to submit NIDs to have basketball courts and tennis courts repaired. When that should be part of the city budget, it should be maintenance. We should not have to utilize NID monies for that type of thing. And I know that you made reference to the fact that, and I may not have heard this right, but that this presentation will be available to all of the community meetings of all of the district reps. Did I hear that correctly?
So not us specifically presenting, but what we presented tonight is actually just our capital planning website that we've been developing. So it's not a PowerPoint that we're going to show you once and you'll have to send 18 emails to get a copy of. What we showed you tonight is publicly available online and will continue to be so.
So there's no plans to have district reps have the same presentation at the community meeting?
So we will, if you go onto the website, there's a calendar of different meetings that we'll be attending in person. Tonight, Bettina was here representing a representative.
I believe at the March meeting, we will have somebody.
Okay, let me just say that anybody who lives in District 6 isn't going to be able to see it because our district rep doesn't. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I think there are a couple of questions online. No.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this and these issues. For Mr. Jerry, you mentioned something in regards to reaching out to the 311. There has been a lot of the community contact the 311 with no reply whatsoever. I have emphasized to my community members to request a code or a number for the case that they are referring to. And yet that has not provided for the community at all. Yet we do not have any follow-up on all the issues that have been mentioned in this meeting. I did get in here late, but I do want to see that recording because there's a lot of issues that have not been attended. But the main thing is that we can continuously call the 311 to address issues that still to this day, we do not get a call back. We're not able to get any supervision or any supervisor to address the issues. So I need to know, how are you all going to be able to adapt to this and get these issues taken care of? Please, because we do need that connection, because like I have mentioned to you and in previous meetings, the community is giving up. And now we are finding each other in hands up because we don't know what you all are going to be doing, if anything at all. And you continuously put things on hiatus and keep us with half a job done with no resolution other than causing more issues. So if you can please enlighten me and enlighten the rest of us in regards to the 311 and why those 311 calls are not being addressed.
I would be happy to. I don't know what your exact issues are. And if they're not being addressed, I encourage you highly to contact your representative, because I can tell you it's multiple times a day that I'm contacted by the representatives ombudsman to explain issues that feel like there's not enough attention to them. In addition, we monthly publish a report saying where we are on all of the projects that we're working on. It's posted on our website. I personally am available. My name is on the website as an assistant director. I'm happy to field your phone calls. And as a matter of fact, I've done so today for multiple residents out of the South Central region with regard to Modesto Gomez Park. And we do our best. We get multiple complaints. We get multiple inquiries. We try to route them to the most appropriate source that we believe they should be. 311 does their best. And they may wind up in an area that doesn't know the answer and it doesn't get forwarded. So I encourage you to keep trying. I can tell you my own experience. When I file a 311 request, I always do it anonymously because I don't want them to think that it's someone from the city asking for something. They're always addressed. If there's a pothole, I report it, it's filled. If there's trash, accumulation of weeds and debris, it's filled. It's taken care of. And I encourage you
Jerry, if I can also add to that conversation, with 311, Ms. Lucia, this is Laura Cruz, of course, I'm the communications director for the city. I actually have assist our communications folks, our council liaisons related to 311 and council request concerns. They are addressed as quickly as possible. We understand there's always going to be items that are dropped off that are not addressed as quickly as possible. It all depends on the concern that is brought forward to the 311 phone call. But you can always, as Jerry had mentioned, you can always bring forward the item to your representative. I know that you've also brought them forward to Representative Rivera, and Representative Rivera does continue to forward them, especially if they are 311 concerns. He brings them forward to us and we look at addressing them. Oftentimes what we find with some of these 311 cases is that there's funding requests related to them. They can be related to capital improvement concerns, which is one of the reasons that we're here today. I know you mentioned that you missed the first half of the meeting, and the first half of the meeting was elaborating exactly on some of those concerns related to bringing forward some of these capital improvement priorities that the community wants to bring forward. So if there is an issue, we ask that you please consider bringing forward, filling out the survey. It is on the chat box if you have it, since you missed the first half of the meeting, in the chat, and Daniela just put it in there, the link to the survey. We encourage you to fill out that survey so that we understand what are some of the priority issues related to what you see in your part of the community in the Mission Valley area.
And you know what? I commend you for that, Ms. Cruz Acosta. The only thing is that I know that my representative, Henry Rivera, has worked diligently and has forward all of this. But some of the other issues that we are having is the failure to be able to get a hold of the representative in precinct 6, which I've been having to get a lot of concerns and comments, and we have nowhere to go. We cannot continuously reach out to our own representative because he cannot be overpassing his boundaries and having to work somebody else's precinct. That's the issue. And I've encouraged all of my people that have asked me for questions or answers how to go ahead and do this. But once again, the 311 Mr. Jerry stated, is something that we have to do. Well, then if we are able to get that number, which some of the people who have called this 311 fail to give that number as a tag or a reference number, be what it may, that is the issue. They're not being provided that. So when they have to go ahead and follow up, they have nothing to follow up on. And
so what I will do for you, Ms. Lucia, is I'll make sure to follow up with the 311 representatives and stress to the point that they need to make sure that all individuals who call 311 are given a reference number, that there has been that comment from this meeting related to making sure that folks are given a reference number. Now, I know that in some cases, folks don't want the reference number. I've called, like Jerry has called, I've called 311 to report a number of different things anonymously, and they ask me, do you want the reference number? I always say no, in part because I know it'll get done.
Laura and to all our participants, thank you so much for participating. But our facilities crew is here. We will be in this room until 7 p.m. They have been very patient with us for an additional 20 minutes. Unfortunately, though, we do have to cut this meeting to a close. We have 4 additional regional meetings that are going to be taking place in the next upcoming 5 weeks. And we're going to be making guest appearances at your district representatives' monthly meetings. Again, in our webpage, you can find the calendar of events, so you can plan to attend whichever one you feel comfortable with. Again, you can participate virtually or in person, and the website is available to you all whenever you like. You can email us, ask us any questions, and we'll be in touch.
Can I ask you just 2 questions that I wanted to ask before they came around? First, how much is the bond going to be?
So the
And
question was,
second is, what streets do we know are going to be put in? This doesn't tell us.
so the question was what the amount for the bond is going to be and what streets have been pre-selected. And I think one of these questions was already addressed earlier, and the answer is we don't have that information yet because this is the process of gathering the input that's going to help inform those decisions. So depending on what we capture as far as your values and priorities, the kind of projects you want to see, then that will inform exactly how much our city leaders want to propose as a bond. But we're
going to the city
If
representative.
I might add, this is Jerry DeMuro. I think the question was related to streets. At present, we are finalizing what we call the pavement condition index study. It is a study that we conducted back in 2018 that we are again conducting now. Our goal is to assess the condition of the pavement so that we can identify the streets that are in the most need. Now, our goal is to preserve good pavement and to replace and reconstruct streets that have a very, very poor quality. You and I both know that there are some serious needs as far as our streets go. And so oftentimes when someone looks at a street and says, my street hasn't been done in 30 years, well, there's another street in another part of the city that hasn't been done in 50 years and it's in worse condition. We focus on the most traveled streets. We focus on the expanded areas, expanding areas of the city to make sure that that pavement is maintained. And we hope to finalize the pavement condition index study in this spring so that it will inform what streets will be reconstructed, resurfaced as part of this potential bond.
We'll be actually forwarding your information to Mr. Duna, so you can speak to him personally after this meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you again, everybody. We'll be collecting the surveys right now. Thank you, everyone virtually who joined us.